March 15, 1944. Japanese Naval Intelligence Headquarters, Ada Communications Unit, Japan. Commander Atsuzo Kurihara stared at the intercepted message, his third cup of strong bitter tea getting cold on his desk. For the last 18 hours, he and his team of Japan's best code experts had been trying to decode what looked like American Marine Corps messages from the Marshall Islands operation. The sounds coming through their radios didn't make sense using any of their techniques. Beseti de Descartes. These weren't random noises. The pattern looked like real military communication, with timing showing before American attacks, lengths that matched real orders, and frequencies like Marine Corps rules. But the language itself could not be understood, unlike anything in their big files of Allied codes. Kurihara ran one of the world's most advanced signals intelligence centers. The Ada base, 20 miles from Tokyo, had 500 workers running 118 radios and 20 direction-finding machines. His code experts had broken American diplomatic messages, British Navy codes, and many Army codes. They had even cracked the State Department's Purple Code before Pearl Harbor, giving Japan very important intelligence in the early war years. Yet these Marine messages were impossible to break. 3 years into the war, after breaking many Allied codes, Japan's smartest people couldn't even find simple patterns in these strange messages. What Kurihara didn't know, and what no Japanese officer would know until after the war, was that he was listening to the only unbroken code in modern military history. The story doesn't start in the Pacific. It starts in the American Southwest, where the Navajo people had kept a language like no other on Earth for hundreds of years. The Navajo language, called Diné Bizad, is part of the Athabascan language family. About 170,000 people spoke it in 1940, mostly on a 27,000-square-mile reservation in Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado. The parts of the language that would confuse Japanese codebreakers had formed over thousands of years. Navajo focuses on verbs, with actions shown using very complex prefixes that can be combined in millions of ways. The Navajo language uses 4 different tones, high, low, rising, and falling, that completely change what a word means. A small mispronunciation doesn't just change one word. It can make a whole sentence impossible to understand. The sounds in the language don't exist in Japanese, English, or most other languages. There are ejective stops where air bursts out using the glottis, a voiceless lateral fricative that sounds like wind blowing through teeth, glottalized sonorants, and nasalized vowels. For Japanese speakers who are used to just 5 vowel sounds, hearing these sounds correctly was nearly impossible. Philip Johnston understood that this language could be used as a strong military code. He was born in 1892 to a Protestant missionary on the Navajo reservation. Johnston grew up speaking Navajo fluently, one of fewer than 30 non-Navajos in the world who could say that. By age 9, he was translating his father's church sermons. By 15, he traveled to Washington, D.C. to translate for Navajo leaders, and even met President Theodore Roosevelt. In December 1941, after Pearl Harbor, Johnston read about Army units using Comanche speakers in training exercises in Louisiana. The Choctaw had helped in World War I, but those efforts were small and improvised. Johnston imagined something big, a real military code based on Navajo that would be unbreakable and practical for modern war. On February 28, 1942, Johnston shared his idea with Major General Clayton Vogel at Camp Elliott near San Diego. The demonstration was amazing. 4 Navajos from Los Angeles sent messages while Marine officers timed them compared to normal methods. The Navajo speakers finished in 20 seconds while the M209 cipher machine took 30 minutes. General Vogel approved a test program. On May 4, 1942, 29 Navajo recruits were sworn in at Fort Wingate, New Mexico. These men, including Chester Nez, Carl Gorman, Lloyd Oliver, and John Bennerly, came from all over the reservation. Some had gone to boarding schools where speaking Navajo was forbidden and punished. Others were traditional sheep herders who rarely left their lands. At Camp Elliott, they worked in a locked and guarded building for 8 weeks, creating a military code using their native language. This was a huge job. They had to make words for ideas that didn't exist in Navajo, create an alphabet system, make it easy to remember, and allow it to grow for future use. They made the code using cultural ideas. A submarine became ironfish, swimming under the water. A battleship was whale, the biggest creature in the ocean. Fighter planes were hummingbirds, flying fast through the air. Bombers were buzzards, circling before dropping bombs. The alphabet needed extra creativity. Each letter needed many Navajo words so enemies could not figure out patterns. The letter E, the most common in English, had 4 alternatives: Z, elk, Anna, I tear, hair, AA, and ear. Code talkers would switch randomly between these words, breaking any patterns. They made 201 first terms and memorized everything perfectly. No codebooks could exist because they might get captured. Chester Nez remembered, "We drilled over and over. One mistake could cost lives. In our culture, words have power. Saying them correctly was sacred." The code was first tested at Guadalcanal in August 1942. 15 code talkers landed with the 1st Marine Division. The Japanese had been expecting the invasion because they had broken other Allied messages. But suddenly, Marine tactical messages made no sense. At Japanese 8th Fleet headquarters in Rabaul, intelligence officers scrambled to understand these messages. Lieutenant Kazuo Yamada, who went to Stanford before the war, reported, "The sounds are structured like a language with patterns, but it matches nothing. No English, French, Dutch, Spanish, any Philippine dialect, any Chinese dialect. Completely alien." The Japanese response was very serious. They put their top code experts on it, recorded hundreds of hours on wax cylinders, used every analysis method they had, and even asked university language experts and Buddhist monks who studied ancient languages. Nothing worked. On November 8, 1942, code talker Chester Nez sent artillery coordinates that destroyed a Japanese machine gun nest. The 14-second message was intercepted, but to Japanese operators it sounded like meaningless noise. Within minutes, American shells hit the target perfectly. Colonel Haruo Konuma, intelligence officer for the 17th Army, wrote, "The Americans have made a code that stops every attempt to break it. We can't predict attacks anymore. We are fighting blind." Joe Kalumia, a Navajo soldier captured at Bataan in April 1942, became Japan's best hope to break the code. Even though he spoke Navajo fluently, he didn't know the military code they were using. When Japanese code experts started intercepting Navajo messages, they took Kailumia to the Auna Interrogation Center. They played him recordings of code talkers. Kailumia heard Navajo words, but they were in meaningless combinations. "The turtle is attacking the iron fish. The hummingbird carries eggs." When he couldn't translate, interrogators accused him of lying. The torture got worse over months. They used water torture, beatings, and hung him by his arms for hours. In winter 1943, they made him stand naked in the snow until his feet froze to the ground. They starved him to 90 pounds, giving food only if he could translate. Through all of it, Kalumia could only tell the truth. He understood the words, but not their military meaning. A Japanese intelligence report in May 1943 said they were frustrated. "The prisoner seems native in the language but can't understand the messages. This is either extraordinary resistance or the enemy is using a special code inside their native language that needs special training." The second part was correct. Even fluent Navajo speakers couldn't understand without training. Kailumia survived 3.5 years in captivity. His inability to help made the Japanese think they were facing something new and impossible. By late 1943, they mostly gave up trying to decode Navajo messages. Success at Guadalcanal led to rapid expansion. Major General Alexander Vandegrift wrote, "The Navajo communicators have proven invaluable. Their messages are faster than any machine and completely secure." A real code talker school at Camp Pendleton started classes every 8 weeks. By the end of the war, between 375 and 420 Navajo Marines had served as code talkers in all 6 Marine divisions. Training was unlike anything in Marine history. Recruits practiced in soundproof booths while instructors added battlefield noises. They sent messages wearing gas masks while running and getting tired. Thomas Bay, who joined at 15, said, "They pushed us beyond what seemed possible." Lives depended on our accuracy. The code kept changing. New technologies needed new words. The atomic bomb became metal egg. Kamikaze pilots were death wind. Each new word made sense to Navajo speakers, but was impossible for outsiders to understand. By mid-1943, Japanese intelligence put serious effort into breaking the code. The Imperial Navy's 4th Section assigned 30 code analysts only to study these messages. Captain Yoshiro Tanaka tried new ways to break the code. He used musical analysis to find tone, patterns, compared messages to Native American recordings, and asked scholars who had studied in America for help. They made special machines to slow down the messages without changing the pitch. They even used oscilloscopes to make visual pictures of the sounds. They studied the sound patterns with statistics. Lieutenant Commander Masao Yamada later said they did find some patterns, like possible call signs and links between message length and mission difficulty. But without knowing the words, this was almost useless. Japanese forces were told to capture marine communication people alive. They offered big rewards, 10,000 yen or 10 years' pay, for code talker equipment or materials. There were a few close calls, but no code talker was ever caught with their equipment. The Central Pacific Campaign showed how important code talkers were. At Tarawa in November 1943, 6 code talkers kept communications going through 76 hours of brutal fighting. Lloyd Oliver sent messages non-stop for 48 hours, directing naval gunfire even while under constant attack. During the Mariana Islands campaign, 24 code talkers worked around the clock at Saipan. Lieutenant Commander Takashi Horikawa had used normal communications to predict the invasion, but once Marines landed, all tactical intelligence vanished. Colonel Takashi Saito said, "Commanders felt abandoned without the intelligence they depended on." At Peleliu, code talker Jimmy King sent messages for 6 hours during a counterattack after his partner was killed. He coordinated artillery from 3 battalions, sending 40 messages with no mistakes, all under enemy fire. The battle for Iwo Jima showed the code talker's biggest impact. Major Howard Connor ran the whole first attack using Navajo code. 6 code talkers in teams kept messages going during the invasion's critical first 48 hours. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi had spent 2 years building an underground fortress with 11 miles of tunnels. His plan depended on intercepting American messages to launch counterattacks, but his plan completely failed. In 48 hours, the 6 code talkers sent and received over 800 messages without error. They coordinated 30,000 Marines landing on the beaches, naval gunfire from 100 ships, close air support, enemy positions, medical evacuations, supplies, and tactical orders, all while under constant attack. Major Connor later said, "If it weren't for the Navajos, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima." During the first 48 hours, he had 6 Navajo radio teams working non-stop. They sent and received over 800 messages without a single mistake. The whole operation was run using the Navajo code. Colonel Shigo Hayashi told Kuribayashi that American codes could not be broken. Requests for artillery that took 20 seconds in Navajo would have taken 30 minutes using normal methods. That difference meant destroying enemy positions instead of losing them. At Okinawa, 35 code talkers helped coordinate the biggest Pacific attack, with 183,000 troops over 82 days. The Japanese tried to jam the messages and even copy the Navajo voices, but they could not match the tones. Lieutenant Hiroshi Miyamoto's attempts to sound like Navajo, according to code talker Alfred Newman, were like someone gargling while trying to talk. On August 14, 1945, code talker Teddy Draper sent the war's most important message, Nahema Edijini Adanil, meaning Japanese surrender. The message went through Navajo before regular channels, a fitting end to the code talker's work. After the war, American interrogators learned how hard the Japanese had tried and failed. Lieutenant General Chizo Arisu, Japan's chief of intelligence, said, "We never broke the Marine Code. We broke Army codes, Air Force codes, and diplomatic messages, but the Marine Tactical Code was completely secure." Captain Yasuji Kawamoto added, We recorded thousands of messages. Our best language experts studied them for 3 years. Nothing worked. It was our biggest code failure. In 1944, Japanese analysts noticed tonal patterns like Native American languages. They asked Germany for help, but the war and German lack of knowledge stopped any breakthrough. Colonel Masao Yamada said, "Not being able to read marine messages cost thousands of lives." Every marine operation after 1942 was a mystery until it started. Major Hiroshi Tanaka, who survived Iwo Jima, explained the mental effect. "We couldn't understand their words. It made us feel primitive, defeated before the fight even began." The war ending did not end the code talkers' burden. Their program stayed secret for possible Cold War use. Code talkers went home but could not talk about their service with anyone. They returned to states that denied them voting rights until 1948 in New Mexico and Arizona, and 1957 in Utah. Hotels and restaurants refused to serve them. They were heroes who could not show their heroism. Chester, the last of the original 29, who died in 2014, wrote, "We were warriors who helped win the war, but we couldn't tell anyone." The burden was heavy. Many found healing through traditional ceremonies. The Enemy Way ceremony cleansed warriors from the spiritual damage of war. Dan Urke explained, "We had used our language to direct death. We needed it for healing. The ceremonies reminded us that our language was sacred." In 1968, the program was declassified. The first recognition came in 1969 at a 4th Marine Division reunion. President Reagan declared August 14, 1982, as National Navajo Code Talkers Day. The most important recognition came on July 26, 2001, when President Bush gave Congressional Gold Medals to the original 29 in the Capitol Rotunda. Only 5 of the originals were alive to attend. Bush said, "Today we honor 29 Native Americans who gave their country a service only they could give." Chester responded, "We were ordinary men given an extraordinary task. We used our sacred language to help win the war." While the Navajos are the most famous, 14 other tribes also gave code talkers. The Choctaw started the idea in World War I. In World War II, 17 Comanche code talkers served in Europe, landing on D-Day. Hopi, Cherokee, Lakota, and other tribes also contributed their languages. The 2008 Code Talkers Recognition Act honored all tribes. John Brown Jr. said, "They told us our language was no good. Then they needed it to win the war." The code showed how smart Native American languages were. Code talkers modernized Navajo in real time, creating new grammar and adapting words for military use. The language's structure allowed big ideas in single words. What took many paragraphs in English became short Navajo phrases. Dr. William Morgan noted, "They proved indigenous languages are not primitive. Navajo could express anything from ceremonies to war." The Navajo code used cultural and linguistic barriers as security that no math could break. This influenced intelligence after the war. The idea is still important today, as quantum computers could threaten math-based codes. Colonel David Hatch said, "They did something unique, a code that was never broken and never captured. It showed that human language could be stronger than machine codes." In the 1980s, Japanese researchers studied their failure. Professor Tao Yoshikawa said 30 code experts worked only on these messages for 2 years and asked many universities for help. Captain Minoru Yamada said, "By late 1943 we knew it was a Native American language, but we couldn't tell which one." Lieutenant Commander Shigeru Fukumoto admitted, "Using a native language was so simple and smart, we never thought of it." In the 1990s, photographer Kenji Kawano documented surviving code talkers. His exhibitions in Tokyo and Hiroshima showed Japanese people the story. Code talker? Albert Smith told them, "We were both warriors. My language helped defeat you, but now it helps us understand each other." In 2010, the Japanese Association of Intelligence Studies Symposium included Admiral Hiroaki Arbe. He said the Navajo code is perfect encryption. "We had Asia's best code experts, yet we were completely defeated." Chester Nez, the last of the original 29, died on June 4, 2014. Today, only 2 code talkers survive from about 400 who served: Thomas H. Bay and Peter MacDonald. They were not part of the original 29, but they were important to the code's success. Peter MacDonald still spoke publicly at age 96. This story shows America's strength comes from diversity. Different languages and cultures make the country stronger. The Navajo language, once suppressed, is now recognized as very important. Federal funding even refers to the code talker story. Young Native Americans study their ancestral languages with pride. Dr. Jennifer Dennett Dale said, "Code talkers changed how Native Americans see themselves and how America sees Native Americans. They showed our languages aren't just museum pieces, they are living resources." The Navajo code talkers did one of the most amazing things in military history, making an unbreakable code that Japanese intelligence could never crack during World War II. Between 375 and 420 Navajo Marines served, sending tens of thousands of messages perfectly while fighting. The deeper meaning is what they represented. American Indians used their own language, which the government had tried to erase, to defend the nation. Young men from marginalized communities gave skills that even the smartest allies could not match. The Japanese failure wasn't just a battle loss, it was a total blind spot. They got ready for American technology and codes, but not for American diversity. Languages and cultures they couldn't understand. The empire that said it was racially superior was partly defeated by that diversity. Lieutenant General Arisui admitted that Japan never broke the Marine Code. This shows how hard it is to fight an enemy whose strength comes from sources you can't understand. The code talkers showed an America that Japan's ideas couldn't handle. They proved that America's greatest strength wasn't just factories and machines, but people and their diversity. Different languages became a real advantage. The Navajo language, which boarding schools tried to erase, became key to winning in the Pacific. Today, as the last code talkers pass away, their legacy lives on. The language once forbidden is now taught with pride. Native American veterans are recognized for serving at the highest rates per capita. Using diversity to make security stronger is now accepted everywhere. The voices speaking Navajo across the Pacific sent a message that went beyond war. America's strength comes from many voices. Different people and languages united for a purpose, but also made each other stronger. The unbroken code shows that differences are not weaknesses, but strengths to celebrate, preserve, and use to protect freedom. The Japanese officers who failed understood this best. Their defeat proved something bigger than war. Some codes cannot be broken, not because of math, but because human cultures are infinitely complex. The code talkers sent messages Japan never understood, but their biggest message was universal. Diversity brings strength. Culture brings power. Indigenous knowledge can serve modern needs. Young Navajo men used their sacred language as a weapon, and then as a tool for peace. They proved that America's strongest code is diversity itself, unbreakable because it comes from human experience and wisdom. The unbroken code still lives in every Native child speaking their ancestral language with pride, in every moment recognizing minority contributions, and in every understanding that differences make us stronger together. The code talkers proved that our differences are strengths to celebrate. They left eternal proof that many voices, many peoples, and many languages, united but different, create the unbreakable code of freedom.